Welcome to another book review. Recently I've been reading a lot, so I'm going to make a couple of other book reviews as well very soon. This year somehow I've managed to finish 7 books already. And you know, by training I am a philosopher. I also have a master's degree in English literature and culture and a teacher's degree. So I've always loved to read and I really enjoy books. But because of my interest in philosophy, and I've been working in philosophy for a long time now, I usually read books in a way that I'm interested in what they say about the culture, the age, the society in which they were written. So I look at books a little bit as products of their time. There are many factors which, especially with the better books, determine what kind of books get written. And many of the best writers and exceptional writers are very talented, very smart people who understand and are aware of some of the intellectual, social, political, historical currents of their age, and they consciously weave these currents into their work. Now, what I'm going to talk about today is a book by a Japanese author, Yukio Mishima, and it's maybe one of his most famous books, The Pavilion of the Golden Temple, Kinkakuji. It's an interesting book, and it's a very good read. And in this review, I'm going to talk a little bit about the story and what the book is about. So if you want to enjoy the story and you want to have some surprises, then maybe this isn't the review for you. But my discussion will aim at trying to understand why Mishima wrote this book and what he wanted to say with it. However, the book as a project is so intertwined, so connected, closely connected to the story that it tells, that it's impossible to discuss one without the other. Now, this book is based on a real-life event. The Kinkakuji, the Pavilion of the Golden Temple, is a beautiful historical temple in Kyoto. If you travel to Japan, or if you live in Japan, one of the fantastic things you can do is to go to Kyoto and look at some of the historical, lovely architecture, and you will probably be recommended by all the guidebooks as well to visit the Golden Temple. And in 1950, this pavilion of the Golden Temple, it burned down. And it was burned down, it was arson, it was burned down by a young acolyte who was training at the Golden Temple to become a monk and later to lead his own temple. This was a very young man, around 20, and he only received a few years of prison sentence because the psychiatrist experts judged, and the judges agreed that he was very heavily mentally disturbed. He was released after a few years from prison, but he died very soon after in, I think, tuberculosis or some kind of chest infection. And it was a tragic event in many ways. You know, Japan lost the war, many people died. There was, for years after the war, there was food scarcity, and the American occupation lasted for a good 7 years, and the Americans, while they had, you know, a good effect in some respects in Japan, they were still an occupying army, and they also had many bad effects. There have been many cases of aggression, rape, and the country has been changed fundamentally in many ways. So these were shocking and very strange times for Japan anyway. And then this historical, beautiful building, which survived the war, was burned down. This was also symbolically very sad, since during the war the US tried to force Japan to give up by firebombing Japanese cities. So it reminded people of these firebombings in which hundreds of thousands of people died. So, you know, it's a very sad episode in history. Now, Mishima was very interested in why this young man burned down the temple, and he went to see him in prison and talked with him and read everything about the case. And I think what this book is about, this book poses a question. Can we understand a madman? And this is where the spoiler comes. I think we cannot. This is Mishima's answer to the question. So how does Mishima ask this question, and what exactly does he do, what makes this book important? Well, we know from other books, Mishima was still very young at when he wrote this book. He was also in his 20s. We know that he was excellent at describing the psychological processes going on in people's minds, how people felt, their inner reflection, to give a voice to that, to give a shape to that. And he was very good, very adept at describing a scene in words that make you feel almost as if you would be watching a movie in your mind. You feel as if you would be in that scene, standing a few meters away from the characters and the things that are happening. And he truly is a master of show, don't tell in this sense. And one of the things that he shows us are the thoughts and emotional currents, the very turbulent emotional currents of the soul of this young man. So his book is basically about this acolyte, and Mishima is going through a fictional childhood, a fictional young adulthood, up to the age of about 22. And what he's doing is, he's basically building up a story in which this young person goes through several horrible psychological experiences. He loses his father at a very young age. He's a stutterer, and it is not a disability or anything, but in the 1950s, people were 1940s, people were harsher, there was more discrimination, people teased and bullied people with disabilities, even small disabilities like this, more severe than they do today. And also just he's very sensitive, and he takes things very badly, very poorly. He can't manage his emotions very well. Well, on top of all this, the protagonist also finds out that his mother has been cheating on his father with an uncle or another relative, a second cousin or something like that. And this also makes him feel very, very disturbed, since his father is sickly and ill. That's why he dies at a young age. And I think Mishima tells a story of a young child who identifies, because of his stuttering, with this infirm father, and this extra humiliation that the father suffers due to the affair of the mother affects the child doubly, not just simply as shocking experience, and not just as feeling sorry for his father, but also he feels in a sense cheated himself, which makes his condition even worse. Now, the interesting thing is that several further things transpire. I don't want to tell the whole story, but basically, to add insult to injury, this young man becomes obsessed with the beauty of the pavilion of the Golden Temple. And he becomes obsessed with the idea that beauty exists in the world. It exists in this immutable and everlasting form. And the temple is sort of, maybe we could say it's an embodiment of this beauty. And he's obsessed with this beauty because he feels that he himself is so imperfect. He's so ugly. His stuttering makes him so unattractive. And when as a young adult he gets the chance to sleep with women, he becomes impotent. Now this makes him even more desperate and feel even more disturbed and humiliated on top of all his other problems. And he becomes obsessed with this idea that, somehow real beauty is the pavilion, and that occupies his mind too much, and that's why he cannot enjoy such an intimate and valuable human act as physical closeness to someone. Sexual acts, and hugging, tenderness, kissing, touching. So in the end, he decides that he wants to take revenge on the world, and he wants to create some strong evil. He wants to shatter the world's confidence in itself and in this everlasting beauty which is represented by a temple. So he decides to burn down the pavilion of the Golden Temple. The book guides us through all these things and how the protagonist feels and what they experience, what he experiences, in a way that it doesn't make this person too likable, but we can still experience this person from close up. And basically this is Mishima's method of trying to answer the question, can we understand the madman? Can we, if we see and if we hear, so to say, all that is going on in the mind and soul of this disturbed young man, can we understand, would we come to the same conclusion as he did in his situation? And I think the book answers this question in the negative. I think the book says, no, we cannot. There is no rational line of reasoning. Several lines of reasoning are traced out and spelled out, but I think if one reads these in a calm state of mind, not maybe in a very dark or depressed mood at a difficult stage of life, but in a calmer state of mind, one can clearly see that most of the lines of reasoning that the acolyte takes to justify and rationalize his action are mistaken. He makes reasoning mistakes, he conflates concepts, he runs them together, he makes logical mistakes, he skips premises, he assumes the truth of controversial premises, he deduces conclusions which do not follow from his premises, and so on and so on. And this is a sad book because of this. And we see the suffering of someone. We see how someone is becoming more and more disturbed, how they struggle to deal with the realities of their life, how they do not receive much support and they don't know how to ask for the kind of support that they would need. And because of this, despite the book being in many ways very important and I think a major literary achievement and very good to read, it wasn't easy to read. I wasn't always in the mood to immerse myself in the story, and the book doesn't give you any break if you pick it up. You have to sort of pay attention to it. If you do not, you miss all the important bits and pieces about how this strange way of thinking of the main character develops. Now, because of this, it took me almost 2 months to finish the book, despite it being a relatively short book, around 210 pages. Still, I would recommend this book to everyone who is interested in literature because it accomplishes one of the important things that literature is supposed to accomplish, namely that it asks a genuine, interesting question about humanity, and it does provide an answer to that. And we can see here the full force of Mishima's sophistication. He wasn't just someone who is talented at writing an entertaining story. He was an extremely smart and sensitive man who could understand that someone who commits such an act must be very deeply disturbed and distressed. And he was genuinely curious. And I think this is a very humane thing from him. whether we can extend our understanding to this young man who commits such an act, such pointless destruction of beauty. And it's a fantastic experiment, and I think Mishima did a great favor to humanity to undertake it. It's not a pleasant thing, and it must have been very hard as a writer as well to try and understand someone in this situation so well. But this is I think why this book is remarkable and very valuable. So if you haven't yet and you're interested in great works of literature from the 20th century, go and read the book, and leave some comments. Let me know what you think. If you disagree with my interpretation, I would be very happy to hear about yours. And thank you for your attention. Have a lovely day and take care of yourselves. Stay healthy.